everybody. Welcome to Frenemies of the People by CBL. It's good to be with you all. That's Eleni. That's Patrick. We have so much to cover. We're still not sponsored by Diet Coke or Wally's, but perhaps we will be sponsored by this artist.
Beneath the stained glass ceiling and sparkling chandeliers, a house is called to order, the velvet hammer appears. A hush falls over the chamber, scores of members take the seats.
That is The Fall of the Velvet Hammer, written and performed by Mac Hoffman. May have been someone that Eleni got to work with back in the day. He was a former staff attorney to Speaker Madigan, who, by the time this airs, will be sentenced by federal judge Blakey on the 12th floor of the Dirksen Federal Building. A wide range of corruption charges that he will be sentenced for. He was convicted back in February. As we all know, the allegations were that he was using his public office to increase his power and take care of his most loyal associates, outsource some of his patronage. But while it's easy to pile on the speaker and to recount for the umpteenth time those federal charges, it also involves a family. And I thought that his wife, Shirley Madigan's letter to the judge in advance of the sentencing was quite poignant. So whether it's 2 years or 20 years, it's going to be a trial of a different sort for the Madigan family. The Madigan defense team has argued that the federal prosecutors, the federal government, were criminalizing regular old politics. And that argument in other cases in other jurisdictions has started to get a little bit more traction than certainly it did when Governor Blagojevich and Governor Ryan were convicted. So anyway, Mac Hoffman decided to write a song about the Velvet Hammer. Eleni, what are your thoughts, since you were the part of the loyal opposition for so many years in Springfield?
Well, I think ultimately why this is so important is because, the state has been plagued with issues of corruption for many years. And we recently saw, former Alderman Ed Burke's sentencing come off on the lighter side. Granted, different charges, different situation. But I think there's just a lot of attention and spotlight on how long of a sentencing Speaker Madigan will get, and that is, there's talks on each side of good and bad for length of sentences. I mean, he's older, and you take that into consideration of how many years is he going to have to spend in prison. But on the flip side, not giving him a harsher sentence for some of these corruption charges will send yet another message that, people aren't held accountable when they're breaking the public's trust. So I think everyone that has played the game of politics or worked in government in Illinois in the last 60 years is probably tuning into what's happening today. And that's just interesting to think about how many spans of decades of employees, staff, people who have been affected by the Madigan era, how they're going to be seeing and viewing this.
And as I mentioned, by the time we get this posted, he will have already been sentenced, but it will be time in prison most likely, and that, especially at his age, is a difficult prospect. And Patrick, if we're going to do real talk, and we always try to do real talk here on Frenemies of the People, there have been a lot of conversations that all of us, many of our friends and colleagues have had over the years where it's gone sort of like this. If only the speaker had retired 10 years ago, There was the infamous moment, and unfortunately, our colleague Natalie couldn't be with us today, and she was very close with former Attorney General Lisa Madigan. She wanted to run for governor, and it came down to whether the speaker wanted to continue being speaker. Maybe if he had used that opportunity to step down so that she could have run for governor, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Maybe this prosecution wouldn't have happened, and it does detract from someone who was a really skilled legislative and political tactician who seemed to take joy in some very detailed, focused on details, disciplined, some may say austere daily work pattern and lifestyle.
Yeah, for sure. I remember when we talked about your former boss, George Ryan, and these things, somewhat relics of a political past that most society says, oh, it shouldn't be run this way anymore. And you look at the what the speaker was convicted of, and it was at the tail end of the career, and some of these other things, and especially as more of his associates relied on technology that he didn't use, led to some of this evidence being there. So for sure, I think his legacy would have been different walking away at a different time. But we have to remember, that aspect of his legacy. Not only was he convicted of that, the circumstances upon which he left his speakership as well, in the allegations of harassment and these other things, it really is just a signal of, it stayed at the party a little too long. And for all the good, you read the letters that were sent to the judge, and hundreds of statements of Mike the man, and how he personally took care of people. And you have to reconcile that with Mike the convicted felon, who a jury said used his public office in a way that violated the public's trust. So it's unfortunate toward the end of one's life that people will be separated from those that they care for the most. But as Eleni said, actions have consequences, and it's just an unfortunate day all around for Illinois, decades in the making, and here we are.
Well, Mac Hoffman's single drops next week, Eleni, if you're looking to add it to your Spotify or iTunes. And he said that it was not intended as a takedown, but a meditation. But Governor Pritzker went to Capitol Hill, where House Republicans on the Oversight Committee did attempt and intend a political takedown. The coverage from the local Chicago media, I believe, was more positive than not, and he certainly went on and executed a difficult mission. I think the reality of it was that there was a lot of posturing on both sides. He was also up there with a couple of other Democrat governors, or as the House Republicans called them, sanctuary state governors. They attempted to hold their own, but there was a lot of shouting over each other and not a lot of acknowledgement of how both sides, Democrats and Republicans, got us to this chaotic point over decades if we're going to really look at the full measure of history. So the Tribune said that the governor defended Illinois' sanctuary laws for undocumented immigrants before a House committee and pointed at congressional Republicans and Democrats for using the issue to try to score political points rather than enacting comprehensive immigration reform. Both the Sun-Times and the Trib caught some of the entertaining moments, including the efforts by a number of folks who are here from our great state of Illinois who are posturing for their next political run. So Congressman Krishnamurthy, we've mentioned before, is running for the United States Senate. He, interestingly, came to Governor Pritzker's defense. For those of you who are keeping a scorecard, Governor Pritzker is not for Congressman Krishnamurthy's campaign for Senate. He's for Juliana Stratton, who was not present. She did try to do some local scene setter media interviews, which I thought was interesting, predicting what an awesome job the governor would do. And Krishnamurti, in his moment in the sun on the committee, tried to rebrand the big beautiful bill as the large lousy bill, and cited a few accomplishments of the Pritzker administration, but then kind of went off on his own frolic and detour, so that he could hold up giant boards and attack the president and show that he's going to be a worthy opponent if he gets elected to the U.S. Senate, and said that he will always stand for Illinois. And he cited the governor's workforce development with quantum computing, and he said that Illinois is the home of Lincoln and Reagan. He showed a picture of the Pope in a Sox cap, Obama. So he maximized his time. Another potential candidate for something, Congressman Darren LaHood, who's not on the committee but showed up, got in a few shots at the governor, who then responded to Congressman LaHood that he should do his job. So the highlight of the lowlights was the efforts by some of the, and this committee has some of the most far-right Republicans and far-left Democrats, so it's a great recipe. Congressman Brandon Gill, tried to have his own the libs moment, and he talked about a post on X by Governor Pritzker where he apparently encouraged everyone to use the opposite gender's bathroom to protest President Trump's policies on LGBT rights. And so Gill spent time questioning whether the governor had ever used the women's room. And it was really some high level McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour level of discourse. But what did you guys think? Did you have enough popcorn to watch?
I mean, I'll say this is political theater. The whole point of this hearing is political theater, and that's for both sides. That's not just for the Republicans or just for the Democrats. Of course, this is what these, unfortunately to say, of course, this is what these sorts of events are for. And it doesn't surprise me. What I just, in my time, in the last several years working for government, I find it fascinating that the law that Governor Pritzker is defending was signed by a Republican governor named Bruce Rauner. And it's fascinating to see just how it comes full circle. And we are in interesting times. That's something that I keep trying to, compute in my head of how we got here.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught this, there was a because Rauner moment that popped up where I believe it was Congressman Krishnamurti who highlighted that very point, that there was an effort to strike that right balance in the actions that Governor Rauner took only 10 years ago. So this is where we're at. Patrick, what did you think of the show?
I didn't have a chance to watch too much of it, but I'll say this. I think what is really a problem is no candidate is going to cut through if you're playing the game everyone else is playing. And so right now there's an outrage machine on one side and an outrage machine on the other. And in some opinion polling, take any issue that the president is working on and the Democrats are opposing it 95-5. 99-1. That was in a YouGov poll. 99% disapproval of how the president's handling one thing. And so what that means to me is we are in a personality conflict right now, and everyone is trying to demonstrate their personality is somehow better or different. And the candidate that cuts through and plays a different game and rises in a different way is going to resonate with the American public that wants to move past this situation. It's been a 10-year slog of politics of personality, and people are playing and leaning into the personality conflict. But I believe the 2028 election will be won by the the person that has changed the game, because no one can play the Donald Trump game better than Donald Trump. He's the most indomitable force in world politics and has been. And you're going to be a cheap second, so be different. And I think showing up to these hearings or outrage on Twitter and all of these things is not going to move the needle in a way that's going to be durable and cut through.
That is a really interesting observation, and it's hard to think about 2028 in some ways. So that is sort of the definition of "it sounds terrible, I can't wait." But maybe something positive will develop in the thinking of how we run campaigns and talk about the issues with the people of America. Okay, let's go to the real "can't wait, sounds terrible." Patrick, why don't you lead us off?
I just stumbled across this news, and it's something we all need to do, but it appears that Jimmy Buffett's wife is in a dispute with the co-trustee of their estate, which is worth well in excess of $275 million. Just a few more pennies than the three of our trusts have combined. But, the article denotes how much time and effort was spent to ensure this occurred correctly, and yet here they find themselves in these situations. And it just reminds me, and we've dealt with familial disputes here at Culloton Bauer Luce, the best of plans sometimes can come unwound and these other things. And it's not very chill for Jimmy Buffett's estate to be in litigation. So I hope they can all climb high up in the coconut tree. That's a Willie Nelson song, but maybe have a margarita or two and go to the beach and chill.
There may be cheeseburgers in paradise, but it's lousy with lawyers here on Earth.
No cheeseburgers in probate court.
Right. Eleni, Queen of Terribleness.
Okay, Queen of Terribleness. I'm going to go with air travel. Not feeling great about it. It's definitely sounding terrible. May the odds be ever in your favor if you're getting on a flight. I'm going to be getting on a flight soon. Not a short one. And I have to say, I'm not feeling any way, shape, or form good about it. So, air travel, summer travel, folks, just buckle up, literally.
But I love that Quiet Skies was disbanded, and Quiet Skies had like two aspects to it, like unnecessary surveillance of Eleni on airplanes. So some would say that was quite necessary. And the other, Dennis, was the VIP program for big shots. And so if the upshot is all the big shots got to stand in line at the TSA, Eleni, I think they're going to make it. They're going to make it a wonderful experience quickly, because all the bigwigs are going to be stuck in the TSA line now that Quiet Skies is done.
There may be Quiet Skies, but Eleni's airplane will not be quiet. I'm pretty confident of that. Okay, my sounds terrible is pledge drive season. Pledge drives are taking place on our public broadcasting. I don't need a tote bag. I don't want the iPad. I just want my news. As you guys know, much to the chagrin of many people around me, I'm constantly taking in news. It's kind of what we do, right? So, which is why we started this little podcast, to talk about the news and talk about politics, and to also provide a little support to our friends in the news media who are definitely on the ropes. And Congress is now considering defunding public broadcasting, and it's more of that same substanceless virtue signaling. Maybe it's a good investment of tax dollars, maybe it's not. It's been this country's policy for decades to support an independent public broadcasting system, in the same way that the BBC and other countries have independent broadcasting partnerships. So maybe they deserve state and federal tax dollars, maybe they don't, but we should all support local news, because we are very divided, and that's what this debate shows. But in my opinion, we've never been more poorly informed as a people as we are now. So for the folks at NPR, our friends at Illinois and Chicago Public Media, let's let's throw a few shekels their way to keep them in business so they can keep holding government accountable and maybe incidentally attempt to make some of our clients accountable. But let's support news because our democracy needs it. We'll put a couple links in our narrative of the video here. That's not the right phrasing for it, is it? But maybe I was just distracted by the Velvet Hammer song. Hey, if it's terrible, it's Frenemies of the People. We appreciate you joining us, and we will see you all soon.